As you may know, Peter has been making trials bikes for decades and only started on these enduro bikes a few years ago. My R300 is still a bit delusional and thinks it's a trials bike, so I took it out again to play with other trials bikes on the weekend. Romaniac Rod was there again with his beta trials bike. He suggested we try climbing the Landslide, a very long gully filled with rocks, square-cut rock ledges and rock slabs that all get progressively harder the higher you go. From memory, I think one or two of our top riders got to the top, or very close, but really bashed up their bikes in the process. I knew we'd never make it to the top, but thought let's give it a crack. So we started with a bit of a warm-up on some easier rock sections down near the creek first. Riding rocks has a lot in common with sand and mud riding. First, you're standing on the pegs with legs bent to absorb the bumps. Then you want your weight to the rear to maximise traction and keep the front light for when it's deflected by rocks. Third, you want to slip the clutch a lot to reduce wheel spin on loose rocks. You don't want a lot of revs. In trials, you ride with your knees apart in rocky sections like this to allow the bike to move around. But when we did the coaching with Chris Birch, he said it was better to keep gripping the bike with your knees and move your body from side to side as needed. 1 foot down. If you lose your balance, it's usually best to stay standing and dab with your foot as needed. You should only sit when it gets really too gnarly to stay standing. And if possible, get back to standing on the pegs again when you can. One of the funny things is a trials bike can do all of this much slower. So I had to try and slow the beta down to give Rod time to tackle the next snotty part. There can be an advantage to all of the extra weight of an enduro bike. I could get through most of this with barely a foot down, whereas on the old trials bike it was so light it was easily deflected, and I remember putting my feet down a lot more often. Mind you, that was 6 months ago and my balance has improved since. Eventually, of course, it was sitting most of the way, paddling with the legs and just trying to stay upright. Real Gumby material.
Yeah, I think this is my point of no return. Now back down again.
The goal back down, try not to put a foot down at all. It is easier going down as the rear wheel isn't spinning on loose rocks, so it all just comes down to finesse on the brakes and staying balanced. First training vids were on balancing and full lock turns with figure eights. We still regularly do those as warm-up routines for our rides, and so glad we do. Those basics really count in terrain like this.
Shit!
Again, quite tricky because Rod could go much slower on a trials bike. I reckon he did it deliberately. So it was quite a job to stay balanced and not dab with the feet. This stuff is also a great challenge for picking lines, looking ahead instead of straight down, so you can find the smallest drop-offs and avoid some of the really nasty sections in this landslide. I was so totally stoked with this, getting all the way down without putting a foot on the ground. Always good to know you're making some kind of progress. Woohoo!
Hey! That was a clean!